Welcome to the Talk Truth Podcast, a show where we ask hard questions and look to the Word of God for our answers. My name is McGregor, and I'm the host for the Talk Truth Podcast. Today, we're diving into a topic that, well, it wasn't even really a topic 5 years ago, or at least not one that the majority of people would have been aware of. Our topic, AI, artificial intelligence. And we'll take a look at what AI is, how it impacts our lives, the benefits and the risk, and we'll consider its impact from a biblical perspective. Now, joining me on today's episode is Nate Flood, and I think Nate's the perfect guest for this episode. Nate is the Chief Information Officer at a global company, so he works on this stuff all the time. Plus, he has a huge interest in AI. So please sit back and enjoy my conversation with Nate as we talk truth together. Welcome, Nate, to another episode of Talk Truth. And the episode today, man, I am super excited. I've been thinking about this one for months, and I couldn't think of a better guest to have in talking about AI, artificial intelligence, than the very own Nate Flood.
I'll take that as a compliment.
Yes.
For the intelligence part, not the artificial part, right?
Right. No, the knowledge of both as they come together, yes.
You know, this has become a big topic within the church. It's a topic in all of culture right now.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of people in the church have some really strong opinions on this, and some people are wondering, what is that when we talk about artificial intelligence? It doesn't seem like you can go to a conference or anything today. It's not complete until somebody's done one of the things on AI, right?
Yep. Even commercials too. It's just it's everywhere. Before we dive into some of the basics, because I want to say up front that this episode of Talk Truth is designed around the idea of how can we as believers better navigate this thing called AI. And with that assumption, or with that idea, I don't want to make an assumption that some people have a certain knowledge about AI, and while others would feel like, well, this is going to be over my head. No, we're going to keep this really, really basic today. I say that today because who knows, we might have some additional episodes that come out focusing on this. I think there might be an interest. We'll see. But right now, we're going to do kind of a 101 on AI. Before we get to those basics, you just mentioned the range. What are the two extremes when people approach AI? What would you say are the two kind of the opposite ends of extremism of seeing AI?
Well, I think in culture, there's kind of this idea of the bear hug. You know, like people are really embracing it. They're incorporating it in every part of their lives, and they've seen that this is a new technology that saves time, effort, and in some ways it saves a lot of money. And so they're applying it to everything.
They love it.
When you get a new tool, you know, you've got a hammer, everything looks like a nail. Like everything's going into AI. And then on the extreme other end, there are those who won't touch it, don't want it, and have a deep-seated fear of it. And I think that neither one of those things is probably the Christian response. They're probably not the Christian response to most things, to be real honest. But certainly in this case, we can't avoid it. But we don't need to fear it. We don't have a spirit of fear. You know, that's what Paul was writing to us. We don't need to be afraid of these things. But knowing how to interact with them from a biblical mindset is really important.
That's right. Well, let's start with the basics. How would you define AI for somebody at the most, I guess, simplest level?
Well, okay, I'll be honest. I asked this question to an AI to get the shortest possible answer. So I won't plagiarize, but it did tell me, it says, AI is a computer system that can perform tasks requiring human-like intelligence, such as learning, reasoning, or decision making. And that's really, when we talk about AI in general, we're essentially talking about computers doing things that it seems like only people should be able to do, especially the idea of decision making.
Right.
And it's often really just not understanding fully how it's making decisions and not having what we call a deterministic output. So when that's a really big word, but I'll explain it. 2 + 2 equals
4.
Right. And it's because you have the number 2, the plus sign, and the number 2, you're always going to get the answer of 4. But artificial intelligence doesn't approach it from a set of rules. It approaches it more from the computer learned how to do math. So instead of instructing the computer, this is how you do math, we say, here, learn how to do math and then do math with it. That's probably the real big difference in what we're seeing. It all comes from the idea of machines learning, and that's not a new concept. You know, so as we're talking about this today in our society, we're talking about some pretty big breakthroughs. You know, there's a reason we're hearing about it every day. But this has been going on since the 1950s. Since we started doing data processing with computers, we've been doing machine learning. And so it's not a new thing, but it is certainly manifesting itself in our lives a lot more. We as individual people are using it on a daily basis, which just wasn't true, 5 years ago?
Yeah, absolutely. Huge changes. You did a session at back in the spring, our Know the Word workshop. Faith in the Future, I believe, was the title. And you had one. And you did a segment in there to kind of show how AI is already ingrained in our day-to-day lives in so many ways that people probably don't even realize. Give us some examples of how AI is already, finding its way into our lives. If
you've got a cell phone in your pocket, AI is really integrated into your life already. So one of the easiest descriptions of what the new big change is when we talk about predictive text. So predictive text is a big word for you type in a little bit of a word and your phone auto completes it for you, or Microsoft Word auto completes it for you, or you tap because the next word is kind of obvious what it should be. That's artificial intelligence. Spelling correction, grammar correction, these are all very simple artificial intelligences that you work with every day. Those are really visible to people. Some of the ones that are a little bit less visible, and I would say probably a little bit more insidious, are the algorithms that are working behind the scenes. And so a lot of those are things like if you use Spotify or Apple Music or any of those music, services, that next song that plays is being determined based on all kinds of different factors. And that's an artificial intelligence. There are these suggestion mechanisms for things you might also like. And that's happening in your music service, but it's also happening on Facebook and all the different social
Amazon.
media. Putting things out in front of us. Amazon. I said a little bit insidious, like they want you to buy something. There's a motivation behind this. But you're interacting with those systems, whether you know it or not. You are interacting with those systems pretty much all day, every day. Yeah. One of the examples that I gave at that talk, which I think is one that helps people understand how far we've come, we've been interacting with this kind of system for many, many years. If you've bought a plane ticket in the last 20 years, you interacted with an artificial intelligence system that priced that ticket for you. We haven't really known how airline tickets are priced for probably more than 20 years because there are so many systems with so many variables that interact with each other and have no human real input that we don't know why the ticket cost that. But the airline knows that they're making more money than they were before, and that's the reward. That's the output they're looking for. So these are all things that you probably interact with every day. Sometimes there's AI in there. If you type something in ChatGPT, you know what you're doing. Right. But the rest of the time, it's still happening without you.
It's all over the place. Yeah, absolutely. So we, in our society and our culture are kind of used to having technological advancement happen quite frequently. I mean, we've seen a lot of things come along. I'm older than you, so I've seen a few more than you have. But going back, to the advent. This was before I was born, but the advent of radio, and then TV comes along, and then color TV, and then the TV quality keeps getting better and better, and all of a sudden it goes from over the air to satellite and cable, and I mean these things just keep coming. The advent of the personal computer, the cell phone, all of these things, and it just seems to be picking up speed more and more. And so some would say, well, AI, that's just one more thing, but something seems different about this. Is there anything different about it?
Yeah, there is. And I think you have to hold this kind of intention in that it is more of the same. It's in the same context every other major innovation has been for the last couple thousand years. But we do see these big life-changing moments that come. So you mentioned a few of them, radio and television. I'll go even further back from that to the printing press.
Yeah.
You know, these are the kinds of technologies that impact daily life for everyone. And some of those really specifically impacted the church and the printing press, the internet. I would say if pressed on this, and this is my personal opinion, but the advent of the generative AI, the kinds of AI that you and I have access to in our homes, right?
Okay,
or
so
at work.
explain what you mean by generative AI.
So generative AI is basically the new category of artificial intelligence that we're able to use today that's not like machine learning. So
not just making a decision.
Not just making a decision, but also not something that is only able to work in a very specific area or place. So you might have been, determining the price of airline tickets. That's a trained system that's specifically trained to do one thing and do it really, really well. So it costs a ton of money to set it up, but it's not going to tell you what to make for dinner. It's going to tell you how much to price an airline ticket. You do one thing. What's really changed is the idea, and there's a whole bunch of big terms out there, large language models, you've got the transformers, you've got general models and things like that. The thing that has changed is the ability for us to use it for kind of anything. And so that is because we've taken the sum total of the knowledge of the internet, crammed it into really, really expensive computer systems. And what we've done is we've created algorithms where an idea or a thought, like some words, go into the system. They essentially take the path of least resistance. It's more like predictive. It's really the predictive text thing again. And out the other end, you get something that sounds like a human is talking to you, but it can talk on any subject. That's the big change. One, you and I have access to it because it's generalized. And two, it's not only specific to one task. It doesn't just do facial recognition. It can generate a picture. It can write a story. It can do research and then produce a report for you. That's what's really changed. And this is one of those moments. It's like Google. It's like the personal computer. It's probably like the smartphone. It's going to impact your life in that kind of way. So we can see the big changes. There's incremental changes and other things. But every one of those things kind of takes the same path. They start off slow where they seem like Star Trek, like we're never really going to get there. Then they start to pick up steam. They go really, really fast, and then they get kind of boring for a little bit. And then sometimes that process will repeat. But when was the last time you got a smartphone with a feature on it that you just couldn't live without?
Yeah, it's been a few years.
No, it's got a better camera in it, right?
Yeah.
So in the smartphone thing, we're kind of in that lull, that boring phase. Every technology follows that. Everyone does that. And right now in AI, we're in that vertical section. We don't know when we're going to reach the top of that, but it's coming. And it'll curve over and it'll get boring again. But right now we're in that massive change. And it's a change on the order of being able to access Google or the internet.
Yeah, it's big. Let's do a little not back and forth, kind of a good, bad, positive, negative. What are the benefits of AI? And then after that, we'll talk about what are some of the risks or dangers. So what do you see as some of the major benefits for AI for most of us today?
Well, labor saving. I mean, I use AI pretty much every day at work now. I know a lot of people do. But there's a lot of things that we do over and over and over again that if you can hand it off to something to do that for you, then you can move on to either the more fun things or the things that require more thought or whatever. But you can hand off some of the mundane stuff. It'll generate creative content really fast. And so that sometimes cuts out the need to go and get someone with specific skills and wait for them to work on something.
Give us an example of that. What do you mean by creative content?
Well, image generators. If I want a picture of a middle-aged man who's doing a podcast, I can describe that and have a picture of that in 10 or 20 seconds. And it doesn't have to be any specific person. And if I wanted to change the height, the weight, the hair color, these are all things I might actually want to change about myself, but can't. But in that picture, a couple more lines of text, and you've got exactly the picture that you want. If you want to write a song to help you learn a concept or maybe a Bible verse, it'll write it out for you. It'll give you lyrics and sometimes even music. So it can generate things that only people could do before. So,
yeah, I think that's, when you think about decision making, that's kind of impressive. But when you start generating this content just from text input, that just almost seems miraculous in some ways.
And I think that's an important thing to realize is that we sometimes give these systems a little bit too much credit. They're not thinking. That's one of the big differences, and it's something that we have to be careful of, and it's something that we want to remember. AI systems either follow the path of least resistance, seek out some sort of reward, or they basically just do what they've been instructed to do. So a lot of systems are trained and they get points if one result is better than another. It'll give the system some sort of internal reward. I don't know how you don't reward them with cookies or anything. It's just a number. Or it will take what is statistically the most likely path for something. So when we say it's creating something new, it is creating something that has never been created before, but it's always being derived from the information that was fed into the system. So it's not really new. It's just what's statistically the most likely thing to match up with the training data that was given to it, or statistically the thing that it gets the most reward for, if you program it in that way. So the lowest price on the airline ticket that they can put for the buyer, but the highest profit margin for the airline. So it's a great example. And so, it's not thinking, it's just following its instructions. So the picture that it generates is really useful and cool. But remember that it doesn't have that spark of life. It doesn't have the creativity that God gave each one of us that are made in his image. And that's, I think, part of the image bearerness of us is he's a creator God, and he made us as humans with that. You can teach an elephant to throw paint at a canvas, but is it really painting? Is it really creative? Is it just throwing paint at a canvas? We're still there. We have not arrived with a computer system that thinks or has creativity the way God created us to have.
Any other major benefits you can think of?
Yeah, it's fast. I mean, I can get results from an AI system on research in a small single-digit percentage of the time it would take me to go to the library and find it.
Research, huge.
It's so much faster. And I think one of the most exciting things, and this is a good one for us as Christians to be excited about, because we think about, Gutenberg and the printing press and how that advanced the availability of the Bible for people. Translation is where Christians should be super, super excited about AI. So we talked a little bit about the large language model. In the middle of that is language. We've taken the sum total knowledge of the internet or smaller subsets of that, and we've created these systems where it predicts what's most likely. Well, that is extremely good at taking things from one language where you have a lot of translation already done into another language that the translation has been done for, and then applying it to new bodies of work. And so if you have taken several books of the Bible and done all the painstaking human work of translating those, that work can be now fed into these systems and accelerate the next Bible translation from maybe even multiple or tens of years down into months. It doesn't take the people out of the equation. And that's something we need to talk about every time. Every time when you talk about not taking people out of the equation. But it is making it so that you have greater consistency. You have more parallel processes. More people can work at the same time on a translation of the Bible and get the same kind, if not better, results than we've been getting in the past. That's huge. That's so exciting.
That reminds me, I know in the medical field, these scanners that we have that are amazing to begin with. You had a doctor, a radiologist, or someone that looked over those scans and tried to determine what was right or wrong. Now they have the capability of running that through AI and comparing it to hundreds of thousands of scans, both positive and negative, so they can come up with, and then they still have to be looked at by a doctor to kind of make the final judgment. But now they have at their fingertips this amazing array of data to be able to make a more precise diagnosis. And so, who wouldn't want that when you're being treated for something?
Absolutely. I mean, as long as there's somebody still going to be able to analyze what the computer is doing, because it's a bit of a black box, those kinds of things can make somebody 10, 100, 1,000, 10,000, 100,000 times more efficient at what they do and give them insights they would never be able to see in the time that's possible.
Right.
If you want a cancer diagnosis, you want it to be very accurate and you want it yesterday.
Quick. Yeah.
You don't want it 10 years from now when it's all been studied and we've seen all of the comparisons. You need to be able to act on it quickly.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep. All right. So what are some of the risks? What are some of the dangers of AI? Because it's easy to see some of these benefits, but there are some real dangers out there.
Let me put your mind at ease on one of them. And I have to explain this for our listeners who have not watched the Terminator movies, and I'm not recommending them. But the premise of the Terminator movies is that Skynet is a computer that gained super intelligence and then has designed robots to kill off all of humanity. Now, it sounds like a joke, but this is actually a big part of the conversation around AI.
Absolutely.
Is that if you assume the trajectory of innovation is what it is right now, that at some point we will invent a computer system that is smarter than people, that will be indistinguishable from people, and may have its own evil intents.
And they'll take over.
If you are concerned that ChatGPT is the genesis of that, let me put your mind at ease. We are not even close to that. In fact, a lot of the scientists, the data scientists and things that are looking at these sorts of things, that the needle for those things keeps getting further and further away the closer and closer we get to what we thought was this kind of general intelligence. So that's a fear that we as Christians, we just don't really need to have today in our use of it. Sure, we can have these kinds of conversations, but we're not really there. More reasonably, though, the loss of people's jobs. A lot of people are concerned that an AI system is going to take over their job from them. They had the same concern when we got the word processor and there were less typists needed in the world. They had the same concern when we had the automobile came in and there were less people that needed to take care of horses in the world. We will overcome these things, but we also need to be compassionate towards people who are needing to be retooled and retrained and those kinds of things. So yes, technology takes people's jobs. That's a real thing, and it's something that we in the church should be watching out for.
Right.
It doesn't mean we should, not pay attention to this stuff or avoid it. But that's the thing. The other thing is we have to remember that if AI, the kinds of AI that we use right now, are only as good as the data that's going into them, we're putting an awful lot of garbage into those systems. So we say in data science, garbage in, garbage out, right? Like if you feed the system garbage, what you're going to get back is garbage. The difficulty is these are such complicated systems. Sometimes it's really hard to tell what's good and what's bad. So we must stay involved. You cannot turn off your brain. And that's a thing that people are doing. They do this with every technology.
Yep.
But they're turning off their brain and they're not interacting with things as much as they used to because it's just too easy to let the computer do it. That has some really big impacts when it comes to discipleship and Christian ministry. Mm-hmm. You cannot turn off your brain. Of course, there's data risks, there's ethical risks as to where did all that information come from, who's getting paid for it, and things like that. But generally, when we want to talk at a really high level about AI and what the risks are, I tell people it's all the same old problems we've had with another new wrapping. So if you want to know what the list of all the problems that could be with AI, they're all the same human problems we've always had. We just need to deal with them in a new wrapping paper.
Yeah. Maybe it just seems a little sneakier.
Yeah, well, it is harder to tell the difference. But, one of the things that people complain a lot about with AI is the idea of a deep fake or fake news. A deep fake is simply an image or a video that represents something that didn't actually happen, but it looks real. So real that it's really hard to tell the difference. That's not a new problem, but it certainly does make it more challenging to be able to determine. You used to be able to trust what you saw in a photograph. Yeah. You can't really do that anymore.
So you're saying those baby Trumps are not real videos, baby Trump videos?
I try not to watch most of that stuff.
All right. So let's talk about, and you've already alluded this a couple of times, but what does the intersection of AI and our faith look like? Where do you see these already meeting and will continue to be crossing paths?
Well, I think you really have to see that the creation of artificial intelligence comes out of a fallen world. So as Christians in our worldview, and what we know to be truth is that God created the world, he created the universe, and he created it perfect. He said that it was good. But he gave us the opportunity to sin. And because of sin, corruption entered the world. And we see sin all around us, right? It doesn't sound like an AI conversation right now, but it absolutely is. The world in which we live is broken. And like I said, if you're going to take a system with garbage in, garbage out, and what we fed to the AI is inherently flawed because of that moment in the garden, we know that the systems that we're using are inherently broken. But you can't stop there, because that would be a really sad way to look at the world. But what we know happened in the Garden of Eden was that God stepped in, that he created a rescue plan for his people. This is the gospel. He stepped in and he said to them, this is how I'm going to fix it. Now, Adam and Eve didn't see that in their lifetime. They didn't see Jesus come. They didn't understand exactly how it was going to be fixed. But what he did is God stayed involved in the world. And so instead of an all broken world, we have a world in which there's sin and there's brokenness. And then there is the creativity that God left us with. There's the hope that God gives us. There is the gospel that we've now seen played out. And all of those things are factors in all the data we fed into the AI. So some of it is good and some of it is bad. And you have to use the same tools we've been using for the past thousands of years to make those determinations. It's just a tool. It's just a tool. It's hard to tell the difference. We have to stay engaged. But Christians can use this in much the same way we used the printing press, in much the same way that we've used the internet, in much the same way we've used movies and television, things like that. The gospel goes forward. And God used broken people. I don't know if you have tried to live up to the example of a lot of the Old Testament luminaries, but every time I do that, I realize that there's things in their lives that I really ought not be doing. God uses broken people and broken systems, and he can redeem this system, and he will use it for his glory.
Yeah. How, you kind of already led a little bit into this. I wanted to talk a little bit about the thinking about this theologically. And, early on in Genesis, we are given the dominion mandate. And so how does that play out as it relates specifically to AI? I'm thinking biblically about this technology.
Yeah, that's a great question, because the direct command that he gives them is to have dominion over nature, and he gives them some specific examples. In fact, I jotted this down because you're right. Genesis 1:28, and God blessed them, and he said to them, "Be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth and subdue it. Have dominion over the fish of the sea and over the birds of the heavens and over every living thing that moves on the earth." Now, AI isn't a living thing, so there's an argument to be made there. Psalm 8:6-8, you have given a dominion over the works of your hands. You have put all things under his feet. And then he gives some examples: the sheep and the oxen and all the beasts of the field, the birds of the heavens and the fish of the sea, whatever passes along the paths of the sea. I don't think David was reinterpreting this incorrectly, and he very specifically says, the works of your hands, which all everything things. Here, but all things. So we are given the responsibility to use what God has given us. We also see that if we abuse what God has given us, then those things become corrupted. So there's an element of stewardship in that. We have to both steward the resources He's given us, but we also have to steward each other in that. So there's a responsibility that we as Christians have in the age of AI to come alongside each other and redirect people away from the misinformation that it can generate, to stay in community as a church and to handle these things together, because that's good stewardship. It doesn't mean that we throw it out. We're actually commanded to use what God has given us. Imagine if the church had wholesale decided that the printing press was an evil technology and had just steered away from it.
Yeah.
Obviously, that's not, history wouldn't support that.
Yeah. I came across this quote that related to that by Isaac Willor. Christians should obey the dominion mandate by using artificial intelligence for good. Simple quote, but I think it kind of lets us know that, yeah, we do have dominion over creation, and this is one of those tools, as you've mentioned, that we can use for His glory. And so many in there, I think that's where we kind of think of the negative first instead of, wait a minute, just like the printing press, we can print Bibles and get them into the hands of people in their language. We can use AI to get the gospel out to people in their language. Kind of a nice little parallel you made earlier there. So yeah, I would definitely think this was an important way to look at AI and not just be scared.
Right. There's right now a lot of the AI and Christianity stuff is being handled more at an institutional level. We're talking about what pastors can use it for and what they shouldn't use it for, and the generation of curriculum and things like that. But I think there's probably a lot of people out there wondering, okay, as a Christian, I have maybe permission from this conversation to investigate this or to use this and be sure that I'm applying biblical principles. But what are some of the things that I could use it for in my own discipleship? And there's a ton of different opportunities, but one of the things that I think is really cool is the ability for some of these chatbots to quiz or to help you learn things. Oftentimes we don't have the time with people that we really want to spend. We end up with a lot of time on our hands, but it's when we're in transit, it's when you're sitting someplace, just to sit and talk face to face with somebody or say, hey, quiz me on my Bible verse for this week. We don't get a lot of that kind of time, but these AI bots are in your pocket at all times. You can instruct it to say, hey, I want you to remind me every day that I'm memorizing this Bible verse. And I want you to quiz me. Read the verse to a certain point and stop, and I'll have to give you the word, and you tell me if I'm right. It can do all of these things I do with my kids to help them learn the Bible, to hide it in our hearts, the things that we need to do in order to protect ourselves against all the bad in the world that manifests itself in AI. We can actually use these tools to deepen our understanding. Now, that comes with a warning. It's a really, really important warning, and that is you can't trust AI inherently. I do some of these talks with people at work. So I'm an IT person for an international organization. And when I work with people and I say, you should be using AI in your work, I describe it this way to them. I say, what if I could give you an intern who was so enthusiastic that they would work on a project until it is done as soon as you give it to them, and they would do it 24 hours a day. And they would lie to your face, but you wouldn't know it. And that's exactly how you describe this, is these systems are still pretty faulty. We call it hallucinating.
Yeah.
So when you ask it to do something and you apply it to the Bible, there's a lot of good it can do. It can replace commentaries, it can replace concordances, it can do all sorts of incredible things, or at least it can summarize commentaries. But what it will do is it will get it incredibly wrong, or it will source material from very unreliable, unbiblical, and unchristian sources and mix those in. You need to know the scripture before you can rely on AI to tell you about it. Mark, you're a pastor. Is this a new problem?
Nope, not at all. People have been struggling with false teachers and false gospels out there for centuries. So,
this is not to scare anybody off from it, because I think we should be using it. We should let it help us in our Bible study and things like that. But it's a wolf in sheep's clothing at times.
So what are some guiding principles that would, let's say someone's listening right now and says, okay, I'm going to give it a try. It makes sense. I like what you just said about helping me learn memory verses or memorize verses. What would be some guidelines you'd give them as they take those first steps into either experimenting with AI or maybe starting to use it on a more regular basis?
Assume that it's going to lie to you.
Yeah.
And that sounds a little bit wasteful, because researching everything that it says to you is a bad idea. Like, it's not a bad idea. It's just a time-consuming idea. However, it can narrow things down for you, even in Bible study. I use it all the time in preparing Bible lessons. It can narrow things down for you. It can draw things together. It can be used as a great tool. But before you apply it to your life or teach it to somebody else, you need to see the source and know that it's in context. These are basic Bible study tools that are not overridden by the presence of AI. And that's true of your work life and things like that. You also can't turn your brain off and just let it go. I received a hilarious email from a colleague a couple of weeks ago. The email was so well written. And at the top, she had accidentally copied the prompt. So it said, write an email, and it had the entire list of instructions. And I just laughed because the email was great and there was nothing wrong with it, except for the fact that we knew that she'd used AI to do it. Nobody had a problem that she'd used AI to do it, but the challenge there is, man, the whole thing got into
hilarious.
the email. Did you turn your brain off all the way when you do this? You can use it. You can't blindly trust it. And I think the other thing is there is no real substitute for human interaction. You mentioned the conference that we had here at the church a little while ago, kind of living with technology, and the subject of my talk was life in the age of the algorithm. We talked a little bit about AI, but one of the things we really talked about is social media. Social media is awesome. It connects people all over the world. My wife's in Nepal right now, and we can talk through that. She can tell people about what she's doing. It's so cool. But there are systems at work in that seem like they're building connections between people. But the net effect we're seeing is that the more time people spend on social media, the more lonely they actually are.
Yeah.
And so we cannot replace people and the interactions that we have when it comes to discipleship, when it comes to being the church. The church is a group of people, and the AI is not one of them.
Yeah. What are the tools that somebody could use that might help them in their own discipleship? Is it just simply creating an account with ChatGPT and learning how to do good prompts, or are there other tools out there that might be helpful?
There's a lot of Christian-based tools out there, but most of them are aimed at people who are generating curriculum, doing translation, and some of those writing the material kinds of things.
Right.
There are a whole bunch of other tools out there that I would steer people away from, and some of those are tools that will write personalized Bible studies for you. Unless you are really confident in the constraints that have been placed on that system, and you already have a really solid biblical basis, I would avoid using something that's generating Bible studies for you to do, because of the risk of poor theology and the risk of I say some of that it's not evil, it's simply just mistaken. So some of the tools that are out there, I would steer you away from. What you can do, though, is I think a lot of the chat bots that are out there do a really good job of helping people to explore biblical Christianity in a way that they've not been able to do maybe with the library they have at home. And that is, you can ask it questions about church history, things you can look up again later. You can ask it to role play. And I think this is a really cool one. You read a passage of scripture and you don't really understand exactly what the context would have been historically. Ask AI, I'm reading this verse and it says this, and I'm not really sure what that would mean to a first century Christian or somebody that lived in the year 200 BC. You can ask it that and tell it to cite the sources. You can debate with it. You give it your viewpoint and say, give me other Christian viewpoints throughout history and defend them. Tell me where I might be wrong. And then you can argue back with it. And it'll tell you the names of people, the name of the theology. You can ask it if it's heresy or not, which groups think it's heresy, and then say, show me the scripture that they use to back up this statement. If you've ever wondered about another Christian denomination and what they believe, man, it can do a great comparison of what you believe to what they believe and the scripture that supports either side of that argument.
Yeah.
There's some neat stuff it does.
Now, when you say chatbot, are you just referring to like ChatGPT or Gemini and using their dialogue?
Yeah. So there are several different ones out there, and lots of people know them by their trade name. So ChatGPT is kind of the example that I use a lot, but Gemini is one of those. There's a whole bunch of different ones, Claude and things like that. You can use any of them. They all have different strengths and weaknesses. In this regard, they're all pretty much about the same from my experience. There are some AI tools that are coming out that are specifically aimed at Christian organizations. So there's an organization out there, I've been to a bunch of different conferences on this, called Glue. The great thing about Glue is they constrain a lot of what they feed their system to not including known heresies or a lot of different things. You will get a very broad understanding of Christian worldview. So you may find things that come out of that bot that you still don't agree with and aren't even biblically defensible, because believe it or not, Mark, there are churches out there that have theology that they stand behind that's not biblically defensible. Yeah. So just because it says Christian doesn't mean that it's actually going to be more accurate, although it can place some good guardrails on things. Again, those tools should not be used as people replacements. People get really nervous about, well, the AI told somebody to do something bad. Yeah, that person should not have asked the AI to do that. And hopefully the person who was asking the AI had good Christian friends and leadership in their life where they can go back and they can actually get real answers from people they trust.
Yeah. Well, Nate, there are about 100 other questions I'd love to ask you, but I think we're about out of time on this. And like I said before, if this is something that folks find interesting, there are so many other areas. And I think of the effect that it's having on our younger generation right now, and teenagers and all, and some of the stuff that's coming out, and just the warnings for parents. We could spend a whole episode on that. More tools, more ways to use it for personal study. I think you just kind of scratched the surface and got us so people excited, going, well, tell me more. I want to know how to do that. So maybe that's something we can do in the future. We'll see. But thank you so much for stopping by and spending just a few minutes kind of digging through the basics of what AI is. And yes, it does impact our lives. And yes, it does cross over with our faith in a very real way. And hopefully we'll see that as something that God will use for all of us, for His glory and our good, as we grow in our faith together. So thanks, brother. I appreciate it very much.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining our episode on AI. And if this podcast has encouraged or challenged you, would you help us share it with others? If you're watching on YouTube, hit the like button and subscribe to the McGregor Podcast channel. And if you're listening on your favorite podcast app, please leave a review. It really does help. And wherever you're tuning in, share this with someone who might benefit from these conversations. Again, thank you for joining us today, and thanks for being a part of the Talk Truth